All right, folks. Well, welcome to the Sunday afternoon talk. It looks like we've got a crowd here of about 18, and that uh, today we've already been talking about metta, but I would like to begin this talk by talking about input. Paul, you asked a question about input. Can you elaborate on input for us just a moment?
Yeah, I was wondering, because input would be the consciousness that's coming in and it's getting processed, and that's what contacts us. So, I would like to understand a little bit more and what it means to be in an input mode.
All right. So let's start off with an old data processing term. This goes back to the punch card days, actually before computers, where they had the concept of GIGO, which means garbage in, garbage out. But today I would like to bring that more into a line with Paticca by adding a middle step in there, and that is processing. So we have GIGO, PI, GIPIGO. Okay, so processing is, we also use the word perception. Now, in the Pali, one of the places that it's used means nama rupa, which means we take the reality and bring it and process it so that we have some output. Now, normally we can see then that the human being is actually full of input, processing, and output. And with the processing, we could say that we're bringing in new kind of input. In the old days of punch card uh, times, the 80 column card would have a personnel number, an employee number, the name of the employee, his rate of pay, and the number of hours that he put in this week. And so you would put that card in, and the processing then would be to calculate his pay, maybe do more processing by computing the tax, and then write a check. And it was all on one card. But as things got more sophisticated, we keep more data about a person. And so they went to having two punch cards, and it all had to be sorted correctly so that the first card and the second card both had the employee number in it. And the second card had his rate, which doesn't change much. And the first card that's punched would have um, only his number of hours. So it would read two cards, process those together, and come out with an output. So we can think of that also as the way that the mind works, in the sense that we take in data as input from consciousness, from our senses, and then we process that, and then we come up with an output. And that as one becomes more and more skilled and more sophisticated in the Dhamma, we move from looking at your output into looking at your processing. And eventually we get down to, in a very sophisticated way, begin to look at the input. Because the input comes first, it's the one that happens the first, it happens very fast. And so, uh, within the Paticca teaching, we say that we have consciousness of input, and then we process that to get to some story. Well, the processing itself and the story making itself is kind of an output. And then that contacts us and that gives us feelings, and then feelings lead to action. So there's just a little bit of processing on the actually input. There's very little. It's like input, process, output. And very little input. And so what we can begin to practice is to practice just input, and input and input and more input. And that generally that's difficult to do for the beginners because they keep mixing in a bunch of processing and output with just the input. It takes a very well developed mind to be able to do that. This is, in fact, where we can combine the two teachings of Paticca Samuppada and the jhanas, in the sense that it's in the fourth jhana where we get into merely input, and start bringing the processing to a close, so that there's very, very little processing done and a whole lot of input done. And as we practice that, that's actually the same as in our ordinary speaking of right noble effort. We have the effort of input, looking, and seeing what's going on, looking at the input, looking at what's happening in the mind, and looking and looking and looking and looking. And the more we look, the more we can see. And if we continue to look and look and look before we do any processing, the likelihood of our processing is going to be fairly good, coming up with a good outcome. Does that make sense? Kawan, does that make sense to you? That it's better to keep getting some good input rather than jumping to conclusions. So this is actually what the Eightfold Noble Path really is. He says in Sutta number 117 that ditti, looking, seeing what's going on, viewing as a verb, not views in the sense of I've already come to a conclusion and that's my view, but rather continuing to look. He says that is what comes first. And we don't make much of attention to that. Now, when we say what comes first, I would say that in English we could better translate that is that that's what it's about. What this practice is about is all about looking, all about taking input. Over and over and over again, we take in input. And as we gain skills in it, we can, in fact, go into that input only mode and just receive input. And that a surprising point is that so much input comes in through the body, that the whole body is kind of like an antenna, and that we pick up things. We pick up vibrations. We pick up all kinds of vibrations, in fact, and we also pick up pressure in the sense of barometric pressure. In fact, before the call started, I made a point of that I could feel that the pressure had dropped and it's going to start raining. Why is that? Is because when the pressure drops, then as that with the temperature drop, that the hot air rises up, the pressure drops, and then in comes the through the wind, the cooler air, and it starts to rain. You can actually feel that. Now, it takes some sensitivity, but the ancient mariners, the ancient sailors knew how to do that. But along came, let's say, scientific inquiry, and they invented a machine called a barometer. Does anybody know what a barometer is? You ever heard of a barometer? Okay, a barometer actually measures barometric pressure. Now, nowadays, it has let us say, a sealed little compartment or box, and when the pressure of the air changes in and out, that pressure can be measured with a device that will move as a meter. But in the old days, they had a J-shaped object that was, let us say, made out of glass, and the glass was heated up so that it was no longer a cylinder, but it was a U-shaped or a J-shaped thing, and then they would put mercury in that. Now, this is not a thermometer, it's a barometer, so that when the air pressure changes, the mercury will move up and down. And it's measured in what's called millibars. But before that machine was invented, the the sailors, the mariners, could feel that in the air, and after the barometers, which was actually a machine that measured it more accurately, people stopped feeling that because they weren't paying attention. And I'm pointing this out because you can, in fact, learn to pay attention to the atmospheric pressure that you have. Now, normally it's at about, let us say, between 28 and 32 is where the normal range is if you're talking in scientific terms. But when the air gets lighter, you can feel that because it's not so heavy on you. Yeah, out in the desert where the sun is shining, uh, the barometric pressure is actually generally high simply because of the weight of the air that's there. But if you have a situation to where the heat rises, then the barometric pressure is going to stop. This is one of the, you can feel that actually all over your body. If you're very, very sensitive, you can actually feel the AC current. When the power is on, now almost everywhere you go, you're going to have power. And as you leave the city or leave the areas where you have electric power, this is 50 cycles here in Thailand and 60 cycles in the US. But when you move slowly away from that, it dwindles down and it's hard to tell. But if you're like we are here in Thailand, to where the power just goes off immediately, everything stops. But you can actually then feel that power has stopped. And you can actually know that before the band even stops twirling, or the uh, fluorescent lamps will stay on a split second longer. But when the power stops, that frequency, that low frequency, will stop, and you can feel that if you're paying close attention to the sensations of the body. Now, here's a question for you. How do we, in fact, start paying attention to these very subtle things in the body? Well, guess what? Goenka's method of body scanning, if done correctly, can actually give that. But I would highly suspect that the way that it's being taught actually produces that because the people are not even looking for what they're doing. Now, we use Anapanasati, and today we're going to be talking more about the input, especially from the body. And that the sutras talk about monitoring your breathing and getting your breathing in the kind of situation so that you can pay close attention to what the body is doing. If we can pay close attention to what the body is doing and do that on a regular basis, this will help you when an example would be when some visitor comes and approaches you, you'll know the vibes change when somebody comes. Bhikkhu Achan Po, in fact, was very good at training for this. And that one of the things that I actually played with was, can I sneak up on Achan Po? How close can I get to him? And when can I do it? So that if I can get him when he's talking to somebody, or if he's eating his food, I could sneak right up on him. But if he's just sitting there, I can't get within 10 feet of him before he knows I'm there. But he trained me with that because he would sneak up behind me and mutter something and walk away, which meant that I needed to start paying attention to my surroundings in the body. So let's all practice a little bit with this. I'll use my voice. You can listen to my voice. But today I would like to do a little bit of experiential and experimental with this, Paul, so that you can begin to understand that we are receiving sensory input from the body constantly, and we ignore it almost all the time. We're not paying attention to what the body is doing. So right now, I'd like everybody to feel their tush, feel their butt, recognize that the body is actually putting pressure on the butt because of gravity, and that you're sitting in a chair, you can feel that pressure from the butt. Does everybody here feel any pressure? They can feel a heaviness, a hardness that's in the butt that you don't feel on the top of your head. Also, notice where your feet are. If your feet are on the floor, can you feel the pressure from the floor on your feet? Also, can you begin to feel the air? Can you feel the touch of the cloth of your shirt? Because that's a lot of sensory input. Your shirt that you're wearing, or if you're not wearing a shirt, recognize that you could feel the touch of the air, the touch of the wind. You can feel this on your face. You can feel the barometric pressure. You can feel the temperature. So if we begin to get very body oriented, what that means is that we're receiving the input that most people are not paying attention to. That in fact, an example of that would be tiredness. That when people get tired, they normally get really tired before they even notice it. It kind of sneaks up on them, as opposed to if you're very closely in tune with the body, that when tiredness comes, you can shake that off with just a breath. Let me just relax. And you see me put this in the practice when we're talking about it. That whole idea of taking a deep breath and letting it out with the idea of relaxing. And this fits in directly with the Anapanasati Sutta. It talks about breathing in long, and then breathing in and breathing out short, and then paying attention to and noticing the body with the intention of the practice brings one to the point of being relaxed in the body. Now, I would like to slightly change the topic with this to go to a sutta that Alex brought up. That's actually an ancient Chinese language version of Anapanasati. And one of the interesting points is in that they do talk about the long breath, but it doesn't use the word short when it's talking about the other breath. And in fact, what I'm beginning to understand is that the word short was added at a later time. That we can stop thinking of a short breath in the sense of breathing hard in and out, in and out, in and out, but rather we start breathing long. And then when we get really in tune with the body, that breathing will relax, not into a fast, hard, short breath, but into a beautiful, easy-going breath so that you can pay both attention to the breathing and to the body. So right now, everybody start paying attention. Let's pay attention to the right arm for just a moment. From the shoulder all the way down to the hand. Starting with the shoulder, can you feel the touch of the cloth? Can you move down into the arm and feel the arm? Can you feel the elbow? Can you tell what angle your elbow is at? Is it completely bent? Is it slightly bent? Is it straight? You don't have to look at your elbow to tell that. You can feel that. When I say feeling, we're talking about the proprioceptive feeling system. And so let's start paying attention to body posture, because everybody knows if they would pay attention, if they would look, if they would notice what condition or position the body is in, you don't have to look with your eyes to see. If your legs are bent, you know they're bent. If they're crossed one over another, you know that because you're merely looking. And so moving down on the forearm, you can feel the touch of the cloth. If you've got a bracelet or a mala or something on your wrist, a wristwatch, you can feel that wristwatch. And moving down into the hands, the right hand, can you feel each individual finger? Move it around just a little bit so that you can get aware of it. But we're beginning to pay attention to the body, in the body, as opposed to, let us say, when you pick something up, almost always when we pick something up with the hand, we're picking it up and holding it as if the mind is now paying attention to the object that we're holding. And now with this exercise, we're going to start paying attention to holding the object, the position of the hands, where the fingers are touching, etc., as opposed to the object itself. So now let's move to the other arm and do the same thing and go down from the shoulder down to the upper arm, down to the elbow, down to the forearm, and then down into the hand. Can you feel the back of the hand? Can you feel the palm of the hand? Can you feel each individual finger? Can you, in fact, feel the place where the fingers join between the fingers? Start paying attention to what the body is doing. And in fact, what we can say is that we're waking up the body. But another important way of talking about it, Paul, is that now we're actually paying attention to the input that's there. I guess that you can actually begin to realize that the body has thousands and thousands of nerve endings all over the body. And yet we're hard to pay attention to any of them. There's just tons and tons of sensory input that's happening all the time, but we're too busy processing and outputting rather than inputting. So now let us practice going up and down the body itself. When we talk about the body, we're not talking about just the body of breath. Now, we can think of the body of breath as, let us say, from the sinuses and the nose down through the throat and into the cavity where the lungs are, down into the diaphragm, because when we're breathing, that's what's moving. And when we are breathing, we can feel the touch of the cloth as the body breathes. But in the sutta, it says the entire body, the full body, not just the body of breath. And so you can feel the back when you're breathing, but you can feel the butt all the time because of the pressure of the chair, as opposed to it going in and out with the breathing. So, Paul, I congratulate you and thank you for giving this perspective of, let's talk about input, because this input from the body, we don't pay much attention to it. And there's all kinds of valuable data. You could also go so far as to think of that the body is kind of like an antenna, and it's big. The body is big. It's a big antenna, which means it picks up all kinds of information. Sometimes you can think of it as there's too much to process, and so we don't process any of it. But a better way of handling that is that, okay, let's systematically, sometimes very quickly. Now, at this stage, the Goenka folks call this sweeping, where you can go through the body fairly quickly, back and forth, up and down, and you can feel the head, you can feel the face, you can feel the neck, you can feel the shoulders, you can feel the chest area, you can feel the butt, you can feel the legs, you can feel the knees, all the way down to the feet. You can feel the feet. Now, there's two ways to practice. One is to from the head to foot, and then from the foot back up to the head. And the other one would be from the head down to the foot, and then from the head down to the foot again. But I would actually offer you a third method, and that is just move around. Bring the body together as a unit by putting the feeling or your awareness on the throat, put it on the chest, put it on the left leg, move around a bit so that you begin to integrate the body and begin to feel the entire body. You'd be surprised at how much data you begin to pick up and begin to get there. But the entire point of this taking this input, more and more input of the body, is that it helps the body to relax, to become easy, to make it feel good. Now, along the way, when we're practicing this, you can also see the stuff that prevents you from relaxing, like tensions in the neck, or a headache, or tightness in the joints. How about your fist balled up because there's some anger there? But most specifically, look at the inner chest, this area here, from the breast area down to the belly area. This is a place where people generally feel anxiety, but really it's a bodily sensation. And that this bodily sensation, now we know scientifically, comes from the fact that the mind has put chemicals through the pituitary and the pineal gland down to the adrenaline gland. And that adrenaline gland is pumping out adrenaline and cortisol, which gives us that uptight feeling. Now, in primitive times, that was actually a trigger for danger. That you can be sitting there minding your fire, and all of a sudden, you know that there's a predator lurking, and you can feel it. The body starts to pump up the adrenaline, and you're ready for fight or flight. But we don't pay attention to that much anymore. And so actually we can build up that adrenaline and not even know it. We can walk around tense, uptight, upset, and not know it until we start to practice what they would call meditation. And that's when they recognize the anxiety. So the question is, when the anxiety is arising, can you feel it? Because if you can feel it when it's arising, you can then say, oh, well, I had a thought about my income tax, and that's why I'm uptight. Let me take a deep breath and stop thinking about the income tax. Well, I don't have to do the income tax right now. Isn't that wonderful? Don't have to be uptight about the income tax or whatever it is that the thoughts that we have. Something's going to trigger it. So, what we're actually now talking about, Paul, is let's start paying more and more attention to the input and stop paying so much attention to the output, that we become very output oriented humans. We output, we process, we make up stories, we let those things contact us, and we come up with feelings. And then the feelings drive us into behavior. So let's start paying attention to the beginning part of that process and start taking attention to the input and spend your time in the input. The more input you receive, the less output you'll have to put out. You could think of it, in fact, that output is the result of starvation for input. And there we go, yan, 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 just like Trump's windmills, and that they're spinning around because they're processing without even paying attention to the fact that that was happening with the windmills by the breeze, by the air. So let's start looking at the breeze. Let's start looking at the air. Let's start looking at what contacts the body. Touch of the cloth, the posture, the pressure on the butt, etc., like that, and get in tune with the body in what we talk about so often, in the here now, right here, right now. What's the body doing? Because it's doing a whole lot. Thousands of things as input is happening all at one time. But in fact, if you look, you can see that the pressure on one butt cheek is different than the pressure on the other butt cheek. It's not the same. Let's start paying attention to this. Let's start using this data as input. This is why the body is so important in the Anapanasati, and yet we don't pay much attention to it. We talk about breathing, and then that's about it, where the whole quality of the breathing is to help put us in touch with the body, which means we now are paying attention to the input from the body so that we can relax the body. And now that we've gotten the body relaxed, we can just do that body scan up and down and just pay attention with the body with, let us say, not the thought, but and not the feeling of, but rather the experience with the body of, wow, this is nice. Wow, everything is just okay. And when we're able to do that, just lay there or sit there, bringing in the input without doing any processing at all, that's really a high state of bliss. And many, if they know what they're talking about, would say that's the fourth jhana. The fourth jhana is just sitting there, receiving the input from the body without doing any processing at all. Now, Sutta number 111, by the name of One by One as They Occur, points out that when we stop processing that input data, that puts a stop to, because of the processing coming up with stories which contact us and then bring feelings, that if we stop the processing and just take the input, that's also the end of feelings. We don't have any feeling right there. Well, what a relief that is. There's no feelings left because we're not creating any feelings, because we're just sitting there or laying there so relaxed and just watching the body in a relaxed state. So, Paul, does this make any sense to you?
Yes, thank you. That was really helpful. Uh, One thing, so d- does the proprioceptive system also have an element of memory? Because it seems like we are plotting from one point to the other based on memory.
I'm not sure I understand.
Uh, d- I was wondering if the proprioceptive system has an element of memory built into it as well.
Mikey, his voice is
Like
kind
if
of muddled and I'm having trouble with it. Can you help me with it?
Does the proprioceptic system have some sort of element of memory built into it?
Actually, I would go so far as to say that the body itself has memory systems built into it. Not only do we see that, and I can give you examples of that, but it was known in the time of the Buddha, and that was referred to as body sankhara. So let me give you some examples of bodily sankhara, which we can think of now as muscle memory. The guy is a pianist and he's playing at a piano bar. They don't do much of that. The piano bars were common before discos. And so the guy's there playing, he's got a repertoire of maybe 100, 300 songs, and the people come up and give him a request, and naturally he knows that piece too, and he starts playing it out. And while he's playing, a woman in a fancy dress comes up and leans on the piano and starts whispering sweet nothings. And he looks at her and he answers her, but he doesn't miss a note. He's paying attention to what she says and he doesn't miss a note. Why is that? It's because that's muscle memory. Anybody who has been a musician knows about that muscle memory, but sports people do too. So I'll give you an example of that. in a moment. But let us say after that lady leaves the piano, now two plainclothes police officers come in and start interrogating him. Where was you last night? What happened? And he can look at the officers in the face and continue playing the piano, doesn't miss a note. Why is that? Is because he's got that music memorized in his hands. He's not thinking about it. Any musician who is playing in public knows that they have to rely upon the muscle memory. You can't remember to think about every note that the hands are playing. There's muscle memory there. So the next example would be, this happened on Saturday Night Live as a series of skits that they would be sitting there and interviewing somebody, and then off stage, someone would throw a large, very lightweight, empty plastic fish at the one who was the guest being interviewed. And almost every time, especially the women, would get hit right in the face with that lightweight plastic fish, surprising her greatly. But then they had a Heisman Trophy winner, someone who had been playing football and was quite excellent at it. And they threw that fish at him, and he just grabbed it right out of the air without even having to turn his head to look at the fish. He just grabbed it. Why? Because he had that ability to catch a fish by practicing catching a football or catching a baseball. It just comes out of empty space for you, and you catch it out of the corner of your eye, and you can just grab that thing. Most people can't do that because they haven't trained. So this is the answer to you. Yes, is that proprioceptive system actually has a lot of training, a lot of memory built into it, if in fact it's been trained. You can look at a little kid, 4 years old, his daddy is throwing underhand baseballs to it, and the ball will hit him in the chest, the ball goes by, etc., like that. But if he keeps practicing and practicing and practicing, he can actually jump up in the air and catch that ball, because he's been practicing. He's got that proprioceptive system down. That in fact we call it muscle memory, but basically it's proprioceptive memory. And we are completely wired with it. For instance, if you can ride a bicycle, that's proprioceptive memory. If you had to remember every little thing that was needed to do to ride that bicycle, you'd fall over just like you did the first time. But as we develop skill, that development of skill is actually built in memory right into the muscle, right into the proprioceptive system. And so you can actually begin to play with that. How many of you do things like twiddle a pen with your fingers? Once you get good at that, you don't have to think about it. You can just twiddle that thing while you're talking. Many people will be taking a test, concentrating on the test, looking at the test, figuring out what's on the test while they're twiddling their pen in their hand, and they have no conscious ability to look at the fact that they're twiddling that pen, because they're not paying attention to that. But let us say a Dhamma dude, if he's doing that, he knows while he's reading that test, he also knows that he's twiddling that pen in his hand. So this is the whole point then. Can we wake up to what the body is doing? Because if we can wake up and can see it, that helps us then to become more relaxed. And that's the whole point of the Anapanasati, is to get the body to relax. No more tension, no more anxiety, no more migraines, or no more headaches. And the reason, by the way, most headaches happen is the blood that's coming into the brain is being pumped into the brain by the heart, but the capillaries are not releasing the blood because we have tensions in the shoulders, tensions in the back, etc., like that. And because of that, the blood doesn't drain out of the head. And this is the true for almost all. There's pressure headaches in the front, there's pressure headaches in the back, and this basically is all caused by having a body that's tensed up in some way. So what we can do is we can help relax the body. We can actually experience, look, and figure out where it is in the body that's tense so that we can relax that both mentally and also through using the hands to massage. So, Timo, do you have something to say?
I was wondering about specificity in the awareness of the bodily sensations. Like when we're doing the scanning, like you guided us, paying attention to each finger and so on. When one would not do that consciously, at least in my experience, the sensations are more abstract and are not like their locations are much broader. So I was wondering, what is the difference in the awareness of that? Like, is it
All right.
better to be more specific and to be in tinier locations, or is it just a different
Actually,
version?
you're making a good point in the sense that this is a practice skill that in the beginning of the practice, just like a violin player, when they're beginning to learn to practice, getting their finger on the right place on the fretboard. Actually, violins don't even have the frets, they just have the board. And they have to learn to put the finger in exactly the right place in order to get the right note out of it. So, in our answering your question, what that means is that we have a general awareness of just the hand is because we have no skill. That in fact you could go so far as to bring that all the way to Anapanasati. For most people who are just beginning, Anapanasati is nothing but breathing. But as we develop the skills, the skill becomes being able to see the texture and the feeling of the hands and the posture that you're in and all this other stuff while you're watching the breathing and also while you're watching the mind. Now, when I say while, that does not mean instantaneous. We're not talking about microseconds, but we are talking about parts of a second. That the mind is fast and it can move around. That in fact, you can feel all of the individual places between the fingers. You can visit each one of them, and then you can feel all of them at the same time. In fact, I want to get a little bit more into that. Within the context over the many centuries, the hands have become really important. That in fact, you see the statues of the Buddha, you'll see always the hands have particular meaning. One of them is that the hand that's got the palm up, and the other one is the hand that's like this. And that the point is that we're going to pay attention to the this part of the hand in the sense of making it warm, making it useful, functional. Christians, by the way, talk about this as laying on the hands as a sense of healing, that we're actually able to put out energy. Like the antennas on a radio, we use the antenna to receive, and then we also use it to do output. So you can, these postures that you see on these Buddha rupas actually mean something. There's another one that has to do with when the hand is sitting over the knee or down, these fingers are in the air. But if you begin to feel like you're floating or flying off, then you can use that middle finger to touch the earth. This is why this is called the touch the earth mudra, is because we can touch the earth and bring ourselves back into grounding because we can feel the entire world right there on that middle tip. It grounds us. So, the answer then to the question is mostly people are not paying attention to their body. At best, they could just get a sense of hand. But if you're practicing paying attention to the palm, paying attention to the tips of the fingers, etc., you can get a great deal of sensation going. So you've probably seen this pose, right? Notice, if you can, the finger and the thumb are not touching, yet they can feel each other. That your sense body, your proprioceptic sense body, actually is bigger than the body itself. You don't actually have to touch. You can just feel the area between them. So this is something to practice. Practice being in the body. Practice feeling the hands. Practice with the thumbs to bring them close together without touching them, to see if they can feel one another. This is I mean, I know that these kind of things require time, and you could say that the monks have time to do that. They got nothing else to do except experience the body. To where people who are in the lay life, the answer to that is that, oh, you can take time to do that. Whatever you're doing, you can start taking time to pay attention to what the body is doing. If you're sitting at the desk, know where your hand is, know where your elbows are, know where you're sitting, know where the pressure is, know the body, and know your breath. Know the tensions of the body. This is all that sensory input that we haven't been listening to. We haven't been paying attention to it.
Can I
And
say
so this
something,
is,
Dhamma?
Oh, yeah.
Can I make a comment?
yes, go ahead, Dietrich.
Yeah, I was thinking, you're telling this is also, I think if you develop it as a skill, you get very sensitive to all the input. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's also why people sometimes feel that somebody's looking at them. So you walk
Absolutely.
on a
This is it. That's
yeah,
exactly what we're talking about. That feeling of
yeah,
somebody's looking at you is real. You can actually experience people looking at you from across the room. They
yeah,
knew that, and they wrote music about it and songs about it 300 years ago, but now it's almost lost to our culture.
yeah, yeah. It's like then you feel attention. You feel somebody's attention on you. Like, and attention is also a sort of a energy.
It's it, right? We can use the word energy for it. Like I said, Achan Po trained me to do this, to pay attention to what the body is picking up.
Yeah.
If he's in the vicinity, I got to know he's in the vicinity. Otherwise, he's going to be whispering in my ear, and I didn't even know he came up. So you're exactly right, Dietrich. You can sense that that stranger is looking at you from across the crowded room.
Yeah, but
This is
also
in
you can
fact. Go
sometimes
ahead.
sense danger. Like if you walk into a dark alley, and then you feel something in the air changing, that you feel, okay, I'm not alone in this alley or something, and then you just
Exactly the case.
turn
And in
around.
fact, what you're pointing out then is that those of us who have developed bodily awareness rarely get into dangerous situations because we can sense that danger far enough in advance to stay away from it. And fools rush in where angels fear to tread.
Uh, Dhammarato, what about people with schizophrenia or something where they always felt like people are, like people are watching them when in reality there's nobody watching them? What about cases like
Well,
that?
that means that they're hyper tuned. That in fact, I would go so far as to say everybody is schizophrenic. Just some people have that label. And what that means is that they're so scatterbrained that they start picking up stuff that's not there. And part of that has to do with the fact that they're not really looking at reality. They're not taking input as input. They're imagining that input.
Hmm.
And so the right way to train for that would be the same thing as we train for everybody, is you start training for keeping your mind focused on input as opposed to focusing on our thoughts, our positions, our memories, our positions, our creations, our hypotheticals. All of that is just an indication that we're not paying attention. So this is part of the radical teaching of the Buddha, is to start paying attention to what is real inside the body, outside the body, any kind of inputs and etc. like that, as opposed to making shit up in the inside of our mind and thinking that's what's real. And our society trains the children to make up stuff. You can see that, in fact, the best place that I can show you would be multiple choice test. If you don't know the answer, just guess, because you might get it right. Well, guess what? Real life is far, far more complex. It's better to keep taking new input rather than merely guessing at the output, because we get good at guessing the same answers over and over and over again. We get into the habit of coming up with the same old crap, when in fact the world has changed 10,000 times since we made that old stuff up. So start paying attention, and what I'm talking about today mostly is paying attention to what the body is telling us. Start paying attention to the sensory input of the body. Know the difference between what Deidre is talking about, that there's somebody looking at us across the crowded room, versus I have the idea that somebody's looking at me from across the room.
Dhammarato,
Can
I
I
have
a question about the practice?
Go ahead,
About
Taiwan.
yeah,
Amit,
go
go
on.
ahead.
Okay, I have questions about this this method we practice, and in Goenka retreat, he teach to go from the head to the foot and foot to the head. Number
Mhm.
one, and he also teach, if you feel any tension, don't try to relax it, just observe it. Right. So
He
I think
was
one
not
thing,
well trained. He only got
yes.
half of the dude. No,
So one thing
we're
is, if you
here to
feel a
not
tension,
just see it, but to breathe into it with the intention of relaxation. Aha, I see you, tension. Let me relax it. This is, in fact, that very point is the reason why so many people have so much trouble in the Goenka retreat. Is even though they can see that tension, they don't do anything about it. They just let it build.
yeah.
So,
And my
which is
another question,
better, to not see it and let it build up, or to see it and let it build up, or to see it and relax it?
the third one, I would say.
That we can do those things, those three things, remember them, okay? To see it and not do anything about it. How is that different from not seeing it and not doing anything about it? As opposed to our method is to see it and to relax it. Now, those three things I've got several analogies for. One of them is okay, you've got the unwholesome thoughts, and the analogy is a truck is bearing right down on you, blowing his horn, and you're standing in the road. What are you going to do? Are you going to just let that truck run over you? Are you going to try to stop that truck? Or are you just simply going to get out of its way? The next example, you've heard me use this many times. There is a pile of dog dookie on the sidewalk, and you're walking right down the sidewalk. Are you just going to keep walking and step right in it? Are you going to pick that dog dookie up and take it home with you? Maybe wash your hands with it? Wash your face? Jump in the sewer with it? Are you just going to avoid it? Just walk on by. So this is actually the same practice, though the analogies, this one really fits better, very close to the sense of when you see that tension, relax it. When you see that dog dookie in the mind, just sidestep it. Let's go back to the wholesome.
Can I ask how like aside, well, yeah, how to relax it though, or how would you recommend relaxing it? Specifically with body, with like bodily tension, like if you start experiencing a very, yeah.
All right. One of the ways that we talk about the relaxing is with just the concept of breathing into it. So you focus, if there's tension in the chest, what you'll do is you'll intentionally breathe so that the chest rises and falls, puts some motion in there, which may in fact help the blood circulation, so that blood that's got the adrenaline in it makes its way into the lungs so that you can breathe it out. All right, so if you've got headaches, one of the ways that you can relieve the tension is by giving yourself a little massage. You can roll your head around. You can massage your neck with your hand. And you can have the attitude, wow, I can do this. So a lot of it has to do with attitude. I've seen recently, in fact, on the Discord, where for a long time, 20 more minutes, they were one person was playing the game of yes but. Oh, well, I've tried making the mind happy and it doesn't work. Oh, I've tried massaging my neck and it doesn't work. Oh, I have done this and I have done that and it doesn't work. Eric Berne, a student of Freud, called this a game, and the game's name is yes but. And we come into it with the attitude, it doesn't matter what I do, I can't fix it. And we need to start changing that attitude into, Dominic, the attitude is, oh, I can see that and massage it and get it to relax. I can do that. That's the winner's attitude. But if you have the attitude, oh, I see that tension and I can't do anything about it, that's the loser's attitude. Guess what? You'll prove yourself right. You can't get rid of it. It'll stay. But guess what? Subtly, you're actually making it stay. You're proving to yourself that you were right all along. You can't untense the body. So a lot of it has to do then with attitude. This is why the Anapanasati Sutta is actually a complete practice. We actually have to gladden the mind, brighten the mind with the thought of, wow, I'm glad I see that. Now I could do something about it. In fact, often the wow, I can see it is already doing something about it. Already when we see that dukkha and say, wow, I see that, you've already started making the subtle change. You've already started to step around it. But if you see it and say, oh, I don't know if I can fix that or not, guess what? You can't. So it has a lot to do with attitude. So if you have the attitude, oh, I'll never wake up the body, then you won't. If you have the attitude, yeah, I'm going to kick, I'm going to look, I'm going to investigate my hands, I'm going to start looking at the body, I'm going to start being open to barometric pressure, I'm going to start looking for how the body changes, I'm going to start looking for temperature changes, and guess what? You can see it. But if you have the attitude, oh, I can't see any of that stuff, then you can't. Dominic, does that make sense for you?
Yeah. I think it does. Like there's a bit of the kind of like thought feedback loop, and then there's a bit of also the physical thing. I have heard instructions like in the past to like kind of like focus kind of focus on the tension, but like look at the space around it, and then that will kind of get it to relax. But I don't know, that almost bleeds into a little bit it sounds a bit too much like the noting technique. But yeah, I don't know. The instructions with various Anapanasati teachers, even like if you read even Buddhadasa's instructions in different places, like he kind of like doesn't always give the same instructions. So I wanted to kind of just flesh that out. But yeah, thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, that's actually correct because there's no actual 100% wording that guarantees to get the job done. An example of that would be in computer science, we talk about algorithms and define an algorithm as a step-by-step sequence of events that gives the actual result. Now, you can take that and put that into computer code for the Intel 8086 chip, and it works. But if you put it with the Linux operating system in Windows, it doesn't work. So you have to, let us say, manipulate the algorithm so that it actually works. Knowing that everybody is different, everybody's an individual, everybody's going to do things in a little bit different way, we can only give an indication. We can only point you in the right direction, but you've got to make the journey yourself.
So
So
basically,
I'm
just
all
try a
going.
few different things until one sticks. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And breathing into it with the idea of relaxing generally works. And when it doesn't work, and we start having the thoughts, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, poor me, I can't do it. Then that attitude is going to directly influence the fact that you can't do it. But if you say, oh, never mind, start again. Oh, we'll get this. Everything is going to be okay. Then you see the attitude is really valuable, really, really an important quality. This is why the Buddha talks about starting with right view, starting with viewing, starting at looking, but not just looking at the body for relaxing it, but looking at your attitude and relax that, gladden the mind. And with the gladdened, brightened body and a glad, brightened mind, guess what? You can actually then begin to manipulate the way you feel. You can stop feeling fear, because the fear actually is nothing but a pattern that we get involved with. We think thoughts that are fearful, they're dangerous thoughts, and so we begin to have fear in the body. But guess what? Fear is nothing but that adrenaline. And so if we can now start taking a few deep breaths and say, wait a minute, there's no danger, everything is fine here, then the brain will stop pumping that adrenaline, and now we can breathe it out. So this is actually quite a consistent method of operating, but each individual will find a way of doing it for themselves. I can only point the way. So Amal, do you have anything to say?
Hi, Dhammarato. Am I audible?
Go ahead.
So just to clarify my understanding, so the idea here is to get more input before we trust whatever input we already got. Like say, we sense some danger. The idea is to wait and get more input, then judge whether the danger is real or is it just our body reacting to some previous sankharas.
Yes, that's exactly right. So if you feel fear, generally, here's the point. We live in a completely different environment that happened 100,000, 200,000 years ago. And so the story is that there are two hunters, each one of them with loincloth and spear, and they're walking down an ancient animal pathway, and they hear rustle in the bushes. One of them turns around to see what it was, because the rustle in the bushes may be his son or his wife or a game animal or something like that. And the other one doesn't bother at all. As soon as he hears the rustle in the bushes, he takes off running. Now, if the rustle in the bushes was a tiger, guess which one survived? The one
One
who
that ran
ran
away.
without looking. And the one who turned to look to do the investigation is dinner. We grew up with that mentality of look first, shoot first, and then ask questions, is the old cowboy tradition. Why is that? Because if you don't shoot first, you get shot first. But we don't live in that kind of environment anymore. So if let us say you're sitting in a cubicle doing your job, and the boss starts walking down the hall, and you feel him walking down the hall, like Dietrich is talking about, it's not appropriate for us to get up and run away. It's also not appropriate for us to stand up and punch the boss in the face. But we feel like doing that because we're afraid. So let's start practicing as if we live in a much more friendly environment and not react to our fears, but rather to investigate, because nowadays almost all your fears are not appropriate. Let's make sure that it really is dangerous.
Yes.
And so this is the investigation phase that we're talking about. Let's get skilled at making investigations before we act. Because most of the time our fear is irrational. We become afraid of stuff that we think up rather than becoming afraid of real danger. However, as Dietrich is pointing out, sometimes we have to pay attention to this is really dangerous. Let's not walk down that alley. And so this is the way that we learn to investigate, is so that we can avoid danger. Does that make sense for you, Amal?
Yes. That makes sense.
Okay. Well, practice. Check it out. Look at it. Investigate.
Can I also add
if
something?
yeah, please.
Go ahead, Dietrich.
Yeah. What really strikes is that if you develop this very well, then you also can make a distinction of that, like label it just like it is, what is really happening, instead of your own history, your baggage is talking to you. That you can really say, like in this present moment, now I can distinguish this is what is going on, and not like your own fear of what happened to you when you were young or whatever, taking that within the moment. So that's a very valuable skill to practice.
That's right. These are skills to become developed. But if we don't practice them, we gain no skill. And so this is why we learn to practice. Practice paying attention. Practice looking. Practice, Paul, bringing in more input and more input and more input. The likelihood of it being a sudden attack is unlikely. An example of that is snakes almost never attack unless they're being attacked. If you're aware that the snake is over there, don't go over there. The likelihood of the snake attacking you is very remote if you don't attack the snake too. So it's very good to know the snake is there at a distance. In fact, in the Old West, and I've seen this actually in Oklahoma when I was a kid, that we're out camping, the first thing that you do before you put your boots on is you turn them upside down to shake out anything that's crawled in there in the night. And then you put the boots on. You don't just put your boots on because you may be putting your foot in a dangerous place. So developing little habits like this of making sure that you're okay. In a way, you can say that when they turn the boot upside down, they're investigating the boot before they put it on. So when somebody's looking at you from across the room and you pick that up, you don't have to just turn to look at them and gaze at them. You can get a sense of that feeling. Why are they looking at you? Because that information is also engaged with it. You can feel that and you can say, that's interesting. What is that? And after you investigate it a little bit, then you can turn and look. But you investigate the feeling or the sensation first. Mr. Bean, do you have anything to say? Mr. Bean, did you hear that? Mr. Ben.
Dhammarato, I have a question until Mr. Ben is ready.
All right, go ahead, Karwan.
Well, in Goenka was warning a lot of time, actually, not once, that it is very dangerous to combine this with some other practices. So now I'm thinking, what could be one of the dangers of doing the scanning practice, basically?
All right. One of the dangers would be that you find out that he's full of crap and you go someplace else. Another danger would be that when people are mixing things together and not knowing how or what they're doing, they become confused. And not only that, but when what we talked about the other day about focusing is that by focusing only a little bit on this and then a little bit on that and back and forth, we're just actually practicing being scatterbrained. And so the thing to do then is when we're actually investigating the body, let's investigate the body. And while we are investigating and continuing to investigate the body, let's see what kind of thoughts are arising. Are we actually having the thoughts that are associated with the body, or is the mind flittering away someplace? It's not really focused. And so let's bring it back so that the mind is looking at the body is being experienced by the body, the feelings are there with the body, and you become congruent or on topic, focused, as opposed to being scattered. And I imagine that that's part of what he's talking about too, is let's stay focused. This is what we mean by the samadhi mind, that is organized, it's congruent, it's whole, because it's continuously on topic. They use the word concentration. I know that we'd get into that. But concentration actually doesn't help us understand exactly what we're talking about here. So when we use the word samadhi, let's talk about it in the sense of paying attention, looking at what's going on, staying within the context of the four foundations of mindfulness, rather than letting the mind wander off into Never Never Land or over to the IRS or back in high school or whatever like that. No, let's stay focused on what's happening right here, right now. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, that helps. And once I was there, at the end of the retreat, my body becomes so sensitive, I could even sense something inside my body. And then, but I was also experiencing a lot of fear at the same time. And then he recommended me to not go inside. And because he said more things will come up and then it could be too much. Basically, I got afraid of becoming more sensitive because at the end of the retreat, my body was so sensitive. I could.
Right, but now you see the problem is not the sensitivity of the body. Now the problem is the attitude of, oh, it's dangerous in there. I can't handle that. Instead of developing the attitude, oh, yeah, well, let's look at that. We can handle that. Well, I'm really glad that I could see that fear, because if I could see it, aha, I see you, fear, we could do something about it. That, in fact, you could go so far as to say that's also part of the reason why the Goenka retreats are so hard to do. They're really, really tough on the people. I mean, when I say they're really tough, the technique is tough on the students. The volunteers who have done that were really tough on themselves, and so now they're really tough on the other students. But one can go to a Goenka retreat with the knowledge that we have been giving out here about the Buddha and do just fine in the Goenka retreat. Why? Because they're practicing according to the Dhamma rather than according to the instructions that are given by people who don't really quite know what they're doing. And so, yeah, sitting there and scanning the body can be really a lot of fun. Wow, I see this and I see that. But as I said, looking at that anxiety, because you can't miss it. If you've got anxiety while you're scanning the body, you can't miss that anxiety. I see that on many times. People have said, oh, well, I'm doing anapanasati and anxiety comes up. Well, we got to deal with it. We can't avoid it, because if we avoid that anxiety, it's going to stay. It's going to get bigger. And so we wind up finishing that course full of anxiety rather than full of relaxed, happy feelings. So some of the instructions that the Goenka retreat gives is actually detrimental to the students. Ben, did you ever show up?
Yeah, thank you for the talk. No questions, Dhammarato.
All right. Well, we have a new friend, Red Domo. Do you have something to say? Does anybody have anything to say? Any final? Yes, Tim,
I
go
do.
ahead.
Yeah, a question. You said that the short breathing of the Anapanasati Sutta was maybe added later. It was interesting to me. If you could go into this some more, please.
I'm not following you yet. Micah, can you help me with what he said?
You said that the short breathing part of the Anapanasati Sutta was perhaps added later. Could you go into that a bit more?
I would say, with new information, that the right way to handle that is to have it as we want to use the long breath to energize the body, and we want to continue using the breath to keep the body energized, to wake it up energetically. And that the word short may, in fact, be misleading, because many students, including myself and some of my friends who are teachers, will talk about the short breath as really energizing the body, get it really going. But it makes a whole lot more sense to start with having the long breath and then letting that breath relax a bit, so that you're now not paying so much hard attention on the breath, but more paying attention on watching what the body is doing while breathing. But this is actually the way that it's talked about, is that you develop the gladdening of the mind while breathing. Well, if you're doing that short breath, you can't develop a gladden the mind, because you're only paying attention to the breathing. But you can, in fact, gladden the mind while you're breathing easy. You can gladden the mind. You can change your attitude. You can see what's going on. This is why we don't practice short breath very often. And we say that we only practice that short breathing when somebody is really uptight, really angry, really frustrated, and can't say, and can't sit, can't do anything. So let's get the body really energized so that we can begin to practice. So in a way, we can say there's two kinds of short breathing. One is with the word short, intending to be short, and the other one would be relaxed. Not so strong like the long breath, but a more relaxed breath that still keeps us energized.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
All right. So, anybody got any last things to say?
I just want to quickly say that it's like practicing the short breathing helps because you also get to know how long breathing actually, how nice it actually feels. Like,
That's true too. Yes, that's also true.
yeah, that's all.
Okay, Mikey, why don't you take this one home?
Yeah, thank you, friends, for being here today. Here's a recommendation. Do a one-on-one call with another friendly practitioner that you haven't done before. So make a new friend this week. Find someone to give a call to and talk with about the Dhamma. We've been having more and more people do one-on-one calls, and really happy to see that happening. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, leave a like, comment, and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you, friends.
Yes, I would also say that sometimes when people start a one-on-one call, other people join in. That I have seen some of the spontaneous calls have almost as many people as the scheduled calls. And that's great. Let's have a community. Let's have friendships. The problem with listening to a Dhamma talk from here is that people are afraid to speak. But when I'm not online, people are more free to speak their Dhamma. And so I encourage that, to make some friends. I can point out that I'm not going to be here forever. I'm an old man. I'm enjoying getting old. I love it. It's wonderful. But it's not going to last. It's going to come to an end. But what I'm hoping is that all of you guys can continue right along without me. You don't need me. You've already got enough Dhamma. Mikey's got enough Dhamma. Ivan's got enough Dhamma. Alex has got enough Dhamma. Anna has got enough Dhamma. Deidre's gotten enough Dhamma. Timo is getting enough. Paul, you're coming along just fine. Carmen, you're doing the same. Congratulations for you guys. So share your Dhamma with one another. Ben's really, really far along. He's a good friend to have. Make friends with Ben and Ivan. So, see you later.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dhammarato.
Thank you, Dhamma. Thank you.
Thank you
Guys.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Dhammarato. Thank you, everyone.